Okay, let's dive in. Imagine this. A drug, potentially a miracle drug for HIV prevention, hailed as nearly 100% effective. An injectable.
A real game changer.
Exactly. And then suddenly, its future is thrown into uncertainty. That's kind of the situation we're exploring today.
Right. We're looking at the fallout or potential fallout from changes to USAID funding for global HIV and AIDS programs.
And this really blew up a bit more after Elon Musk spoke at the Qatar Economic Forum, so we'll be digging into that, using info mainly from The Guardian to try and, get to the bottom of what's actually going on.
And right off the bat, what's really striking is how different the stories are. You've got Elon Musk at that forum saying very clearly that these HIV/AIDS medication programs, they're continuing.
He said claims of defunding were false.
Yeah, false.
Yeah.
And he even offered to, fix it right now if any programs had been defunded. Very strong statement.
Okay, but then you talk to global health officials, people actually working in these programs.
And they're painting a very different picture. They're using phrases like widespread and disastrous effects.
Wow. Okay.
They claim the White House has been throttling foreign aid, and the result, they say, is a surge in new HIV infections.
A surge. That's serious. It sounds like it could threaten that big goal of ending HIV as a public health threat by 2030.
That's exactly the concern. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why the disconnect?
Yeah, is it like different parts of the funding chain? Or maybe they define continuing differently? What's going on there?
It's a really good question, and maybe understanding the structure helps. We need to talk about USAID and PEPFAR.
Right, the big players.
Yeah. For years, USAID has been, central to the global HIV/AIDS fight, mostly through PEPFAR. That's the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief.
Okay.
Essentially, PEPFAR is the main way the U.S. funds this global effort. And it's a huge amount of money, something like $110 billion since it started back in 2003, operates in loads of countries.
So PEPFAR isn't like its own separate thing. It's run through USAID.
Correct. It's funded and administered via USAID.
Which means
Right.
if USAID's structure changed significantly back in January, which people are calling a dismantling.
Then PEPFAR, its main channel for this work, is inevitably facing, a lot of uncertainty about its future, its funding, its operations.
Okay, so what did that uncertainty actually look like on the ground? Did things just stop?
Well, initially, the State Department stepped in with a temporary waiver. That allowed some funding to keep flowing.
Some funding. For what specifically?
Specifically for treating people already living with HIV, and also for pregnant and breastfeeding women. The idea was to prevent, immediate chaos in care.
And this sounds like the crucial, but that waiver didn't cover prevention programs?
Reportedly, no. That's the key issue here. So things like PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Like the pill you take to prevent malaria before you travel. That kind of idea.
Exactly like that. But for HIV prevention, really vital stuff. And those programs have largely ground to a halt because the U.S. funding wasn't covered by that waiver.
And we're seeing actual effects. It's not just theoretical.
Oh, absolutely. There are concrete examples coming out. Look at Botswana. The number of people getting PrEP is reportedly down by half compared to last year.
Half. Wow.
Yeah. Mozambique, they had a PrEP program reaching 30,000 people. Now it's down to 19,000. Zimbabwe, similar story, dropped from 4,000 to 1,800.
And it's not just the medication itself.
No. Condom distribution, too. In Nigeria, they went from distributing 850,000 condoms in December to just 300,000 by February. That's a huge drop in a basic prevention tool.
And beyond prevention, are other services okay?
Well, the UN has actually reported disruptions even to testing and treatment services, just from the confusion, the sort of organizational vacuum left by the USAID changes.
So people showing up for appointments and finding nothing.
Essentially, yes, or finding services severely hampered. Dr. Anjali Akrakar from UNAIDS, she used to work with PEPFAR, actually. She talked about this.
What did she say?
She pointed out that thousands of workers just stopped working overnight. Community health workers, lab techs, data clerks.
Yeah.
All crucial people.
You can't just switch that back on easily.
Exactly her point. Restarting these complex systems takes time and effort. The worry she expressed is that these cuts aren't just a pause. They could actually reverse years of progress, undoing hard work.
Which brings us back to this new drug, lenacapavir. You mentioned it at the start.
Right, lenacapavir. For anyone not familiar, it's a new injectable. People are really excited about it.
Closest thing to a vaccine, I think I read.
Some are calling it that, yeah. It seems to be nearly 100% effective in preventing HIV if you get an injection just every 6 months. It's currently under FDA review.
Okay, so incredibly promising. What's the connection to the funding issue?
Well, there was a big plan, a partnership between PEPFAR and the Global Fund
To do what?
to roll out lenacapavir to at least 2 million people within 3 years. A massive prevention push.
But lenacapavir is a prevention service.
Exactly. So because the waiver apparently doesn't cover prevention, this whole rollout plan is now under a huge cloud of uncertainty.
And that's what Musk was asked about at the Qatar Forum.
Yes. When lenacapavir was brought up, he again asked, which programs aren't funded, offered to fix it right now. But he also sounded skeptical that the claims were even true.
Quite a stance, given what the health organizations are saying.
It is. UNAIDS responded quite diplomatically, saying they were encouraged by his willingness to review the situation.
But there's some history here, isn't there, with similar promises?
There is, unfortunately, a previous situation involving Ebola prevention funding. Musk claimed cuts were accidental and fixed. USAID officials later said, that wasn't accurate.
Okay, so that context is important when hearing the current assurances.
It adds a layer of caution, certainly.
So where does that leave the lenacapavir rollout now? Is it just dead in the water?
Well, the Global Fund says it still plans to go ahead, even without PEPFAR's direct money, which is a big commitment from them.
But PEPFAR wouldn't just bring money, right? They have networks, experience.
Precisely. Losing PEPFAR's funding and their partnerships, their infrastructure on the ground, that would still be a massive blow. It would definitely impact how quickly and widely this drug gets out there.
And has there been any clarification since that initial waiver back in February? Any new policy from the administration?
Nothing clear. No new policy on PEPFAR has been announced since February 1st. And what's more, U.S. partners who are actually doing the prevention work have reportedly had their agreements terminated.
Terminated. So not just paused, but ended.
That's the report, yes.
And the worst case scenario, what does UNAIDS project if all this stops?
It's pretty grim. Their estimate is that if PEPFAR's treatment and prevention services were to stop completely, we could see an extra 6.6 million HIV infections by 2029.
6.6 million. That's staggering. It really puts the stakes into perspective.
Yeah.
Decades of work potentially undone.
It really does. So you're left trying to reconcile these two narratives. Elon Musk saying everything's fine, programs are funded.
And global health experts on the ground reporting severe disruptions, especially to prevention, with potentially catastrophic results down the line.
Yeah. The impact on prevention seems to be the immediate critical point of divergence, and the uncertainty it creates for something as promising as lenacapavir is deeply concerning.
So the big question we leave you with is this. Faced with these conflicting accounts, these complexities, what are the real consequences of these funding shifts? What happens next in the global fight against HIV/AIDS?
And perhaps more importantly, what should happen next? It's crucial, isn't it, to think about the human lives behind these policy decisions and budget lines. The potential cost if things go wrong is just immense.